Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode where I have a beautiful guest, Kathryn Mussell, joining us today. She's here to share her wisdom, her insights, and her light with us. So, welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Jacob.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you, and it's nice for us to connect in this way. You know, we've sat in circle a couple of times, but not too much, really.
Indeed. And we've been on each other's radar, in each other's orbit for a while, but we haven't connected like this. So this is really special.
Yes, yeah. So grateful for that. It's always nice to come into these circles and then just see what's explored. However, I do know you have a topic for us that we're going to get into
I
today.
do.
Yeah,
I
so
do.
I'm gonna share that. So you're excited to share with you all a talk about the difference between open circuit experience of life versus a closed circuit experience of life. Open, we are present and in tune with the current currency of life force energy. Closed, we are entangled in our desires with the projections of the mind defined by the limits of what we think we believe we know.
It's a
Wow,
mouthful,
it
but
is.
I'm going to simplify it for you all. So that's the good news.
It sounds like a
So
journey.
may
It's
I take
like,
it away?
oh, yeah, go away. Come on,
Okay.
jump into it. Oh, arms
Well,
and legs and
excellent.
all.
Okay. Yes, let's explore what we think we believe we know. So, it's really a different way to explore unity consciousness. We, like you said, we have the same orbit, and we're in the same kind of people with the same kind of speak about elevated consciousness and moving to different higher states of being. And it used to be that unity consciousness was like, ooh, what's that? And now I feel like it's one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around quite a bit without any real context or content to it. And I kind of want to simplify it, and especially in the way that I teach and share about it. I just taught a class today, so it's all fresh in my mind, and there's so much to talk about here. But I really, I love nebulous esoteric concepts. I've written 3 books with nebulous esoteric concepts, but what I really love to do is bring things down to a really concretized level that we can use it and make it practical and applicable. So that's what I hope to do for your listeners here today. So when we're talking about unity consciousness and the idea that we are all one, that is an open circuit context, in the sense that when you are thinking that you are one with everything and everyone, that there is really no trick of the mind, which is separation, that everything you endeavor to do, every act, every thought, every belief is going to be reflected in your outer reality, and it ripples out to the whole. And when we take in the context that everything is really just one, everything emanates from one consciousness. You can call it God, you can call it source, you can call it the infinite intelligence, you can call it the field, whatever it is, it's all really the same one consciousness from which everything emanates. It is light, it is pure love. And in that sense, that it is that supreme state of consciousness, it has no equal and it has no opposite. So a lot of people think that, when we talk about light, that the opposite is dark. Well, not in this particular premise, because everything emanates from that light, even the dark. The dark is subject to the light from whence it came. And everything also in this light, another interchangeable word for light, is love. It's pure love. We come from that and we return to it. But the rub for most people is, okay, I get that. Conceptually, I think a lot of people can get with that premise, but what is it like to live that? What does that really mean? And I think it can, number one, it irks the heck out of the mind and the ego. And I kind of use those words interchangeably, because it's going to rub up against everything we think we believe we know. And what is that? The sum total of meanings, value that we've placed on our experiences over a lifetime. And a lot of that is tangled up in feelings we don't want to feel, like anger, fear, and sadness. I call them the big 3. And when we are tangled up, creating meanings about life, which experiences, just as they happen, as they are experienced, are in and of themselves neutral. life in and of itself is neutral. It's us as humans translating what this form means, giving it meaning that gives life or our lives meaning or value. It's what we decide that's going to be. The problem is a lot of that is tangled up with feelings that we felt early on that we didn't have maybe the cognitive ability or the mental or emotional intelligence to be able to sort it out and say, okay, I don't have to define myself through this uncomfortable feeling, but I'm gonna. And so a lot of us end up looking at life through this very distorted lens and saying, this is me. And if this is you, based on a level of distortion, everything that's reflected into outer reality as a result of that perceptual bias that might not be rooted in the most wholesome things is also going to be distorted. So am I laying the premise okay here? Have I lost you yet?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think it's great. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm with you
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Great, then I'm going to keep going. So, and feel free to interrupt me and ask to clarify anything that's not really jibing so well. So,
Yep.
Given that context, given that premise, when we look at something that seems pretty lofty, like unity consciousness, that we are all one and peace out, brother, and all that, and that's wonderful, but how do we live that? How do we move from this distorted lens of viewing ourselves, identifying ourselves in the world, and then thereby, by extrapolation, identifying our identity through that, our experience of life through that? How do we get from there to seeing that we really are all one? There is no separation. And I'm going to act in the best and highest interest of myself, because I know in doing that, that naturally it can't not ripple out to the highest and best benefit and highest good of everyone else, because we're all one. And so it's really not about doing anything. It's about, first of all, understanding that the open circuit experience is what I just explained, in essence, that when we are acting in our highest and best interest, in other words, let's just say we know there's work to do on ourselves. Like maybe there's an area of our lives that it's a little shabby. Maybe our relationships are not that great. Maybe we can't hold down a job. Maybe our money situation, it seems like it slips like sand through our fingers. There's somewhere where we feel like we're not in the most wholesome experience of life. Some aspect is lacking. So if we say, well, I want to do some work on myself, what you're doing when you are working on yourself is essentially, by extension, doing a healing process for every single one of the billions of people on the planet, or what you think are billions of people, because they're all just you under different circumstances. You are healing everyone. You can't not, if you are jibing with the premise of unity consciousness, that we are all one and everything translates, comes from, returns to the one. So when you are in this open circuit of thinking, something really miraculous happens, that you'll realize that it's not certain doings that are synchronicities, that the current of life force energy itself is synchronicitous, that everything about life itself, just as it is miraculous. There's nothing you have to do to make it that way or to make it so. It's about opening up past those disturbances, that interference in your mind that says you are not that, you are not whole, you are not of love and light, and you will never not be that. There's some interference pattern in your energy, and it's usually because of the definitions, the belief structures and systems that we have that are rooted in anything but that. And when it is lacking in that sense, we are in closed circuit thinking. So the mind will take over and say, well, I'm you, I'm the mind. And a lot of us think we are the mind. The mind is you. It's not. The mind likes to pretend and think that it's you. And we like to maybe go along with that idea, so that whenever we get stuck, we get into a bind and we try to figure something out mentally. We're just going to go off of old news. We're going to go off of past information. We're going to go off what was before, even if we've done, let's say, some work on ourselves with our money situation, our relationship situation, what have you. we've moved in essence into a different frequency state. That means we are not the same person that we were before. However, when we come up maybe against a familiar theme or roadblock in our lives, and we treat that with the same level of response that we always have based on what the mind thinks, which thinks it's you and thinks this has all the answers because it got you out of this jam before, you're going to respond to that situation the same way you always have. And what you're going to do is just keep looping back in. So you might have elevated your frequency, but it might have just been a dalliance, a flirtation, because you didn't cement it. And it's because you have not responded differently to a theme, what I call an echo, that presented in what you thought was the same way as before. Well, let's just say that we're in this time-space experience. Yes, we agreed as souls to come and play on this playground, this great mystery school of Earth, and say, yeah, this is awesome. We're going to play with polarity. We're going to play with duality. We're going to play with contrast, conflict. We're going to learn how to deal with all the emotions and play with them. Some of them we're not going to like. Some of them we're really going to like. And we're here to play with all of it. But when we start getting into this place where the meanings, the moments in time where we've latched onto that didn't feel so good, those are the things that are going to present as echoes, because it's just habit. The old version of us is more of a process than a place, a space, or way of being. It's more of a process of habit. And so as we're playing with this time-space continuum, we're realizing that maybe what comes up, even though we've shifted our frequency state, moved into a different essence of being, a familiar theme will present itself and we'll say, see, I knew it. I'm not allowed to have this thing, be this thing. We'll go back to the old self, reroute the consciousness once again in this closed circuit experience of life. And we kill off this new version of self before it even has a chance to establish. And we do this over and over and over again. And so if that makes sense, that's the closed circuit experience of being in a nutshell. And it's really because we don't realize that here we are playing with space-time. What's coming up is really just an echo of the old self. It's not presenting new information, not really. But if we treat it like the old self, we're going to stay in that loop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I love how you explain it as well. Yeah, I haven't heard that term before, but it resonates. And often what I refer to as the reference center, because it's you can refer to it. It's there. It's what I've experienced, so it's my go-to.
Right.
Or it even just comes forward. Actually, it's just automatic, like you say, in a certain situation, and then
And so familiar that we learn to expect it. And a lot of
yes,
times we have expectation rolled into that, and that can actually, I don't want to say attract the situation because that's not really what's going on, but for our law of attraction fans, let's just call it that. But it's more of a process of habit really than anything else. You expect that it's going to show up, and guess what? It does.
yes,
And the problem is that we greet that situation exactly as we have thousands and thousands of times before. And here we are expecting something different, and we go into disappointment once again. We feel like, oh my God, none of this stuff works. I don't work. I'm broken. I need fixing. None of that is true. It really just depends on creating a different response. So in order to be in the open circuit level of experience, keeping a level of curiosity, a sense of wonder when that happens, instead of the, oh, F my life experience, like this again, this old chestnut. If you're greeting it that way, you're greeting it as the old self.
so
All you have to
childlike.
do,
Basically, you're saying that curiosity, wonder, the essence of us. Yeah.
exactly, because at our deepest, most truthful core of self, our creator being, we are nothing but curiosity. We wouldn't as creator, because we all emanate from that essence. If we weren't curious, we would have had no interest in creating experience. An experience as viewed through 8 billion people on planet Earth, and who knows how many other souls or entities or beings or sentient life elsewhere, right? If creator, and we are that, wasn't curious. So when we go back into that energy, we plug ourselves back into the open circuit experience of life. And the open circuit experience is really about like, well, how am I going to feel when this presents itself? Seemingly it's the same familiar thing again, is it? What if I chose to greet it with a different feeling, like, oh, laughter for one. Oh my God, how silly of me to have been maybe curious or expecting this to be, that's not really what I want. That's not what I prefer. What would I prefer? What would actually be a far better situation right now? And not only for me, but for everybody. When you start asking questions like that, you move back into the open circuit experience. So it's not complicated. Even though this life is richly complex, it's really not complicated. So I hope that's a helpful way of framing that.
Yeah, I love it, and I feel it is another way of relating, and that's what I'm getting from this as well. You're saying it's about relating, and I find that a really strong tool is how am I relating to this? Where am I relating from? What is
Right.
my relationship within it? And all those things. So I feel that that's similar. And I actually wanted to go back a little bit because when you said about how when we choose something and that ripples out, I totally get it. So when we choose to go into the open circuit and create a new way of being or have a different experience that's more supportive and or heal, it goes out and everyone feels it. So in that sense, are we constantly feeling everyone else healing? And maybe there's moments where we haven't done anything ourselves, but there's been a shift through someone
Mhm.
else's journey.
It's really dependent upon how much our energy is connected to the feeling. Because wherever we're most rooted in the moment, and everything is now, everything is the now moment, everything is a translation of the now moment. There really isn't a past. If there is, it's coming up in your body as a feeling that is reminiscent of something you call the past, but it can never not be now. Future is the same kind of ghost land. It doesn't exist. It's unwritten. It's a premise and a mental construct, but little more than that. It's a way we kind of gauge, like, oh, here's what I would prefer, maybe what I'd like to experience in my life tomorrow, right? But other than that, it's a really open void, and it's open to complete interpretation. There's really nothing there unless we put something there. So when we're relating in the moment to a particular feeling, as far as our body and mind is concerned anyway, it's everything. It's absolutely everything. There is nothing else. And we have a reticular activating system that supports that. Even though it's picking up millions of bits of data in every given moment, the thing that we've decided to fixate on, in other words, where we've been in the process or the habit of being a certain way for so long, we've trained our own biology, our own physiology to say, well, this is me. This will always be me. This is never not me because this is all I know. This is my bubble and sphere of reference rooted in this feeling. And if it's not something we'd like to experience, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, it's either anger, fear, or sadness. And when we can just be curious about that, and a lot of us don't want to because we want to run screaming from those feeling states, we don't like it. We are afraid of fear. But if it's all you, isn't the fear, the anger, and the sadness of you, for you, by you? And maybe in that moment, it's a messenger. And if we can even get to the curious bit about, well, what if this is for me right now? What if this is a message from myself, by myself, to say, hey, there's something deeper to
For
look at
myself.
here. Right, exactly. What am I so afraid of? It's all me. And if it's all me, wouldn't I have created ways to get myself out of moments where I don't prefer to be? Of course, because it's all you, and you are the source and everything plus. So you are the resources available to all of source as well. That means if you want to call them solutions, if you want to call them answers, it's all inside you. The trick is to be curious and not get rooted and pulled down by the feelings you don't want to feel. It's actually in those moments they're begging you to go deeper into the feelings rather than bypass them or swat them away. And a lot of us just don't like to do that.
Yeah.
I
It
get
is
it.
true.
It's not fun.
Yes. No, yeah, totally. I get it. Yeah. I've been there and still happens.
Of
I
course.
one of my Qigong teachers, he brought something to the table. It was really beautiful. So he was like, do you love pain or do you hate pain? And I was like, oh, interesting. I know I don't hate it, but I don't feel to say I love it. But what he was getting to was that, pain is showing you something, it's communicating with you. And so therefore you would love it because it's an opportunity to go into it and see what it is and explore that. and then evolve and move through it and do
Yes.
whatever's required. Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah.
I love that framing. And I like to bring this question to my clients, what if you could accept the possibility that pain is not a destination, it's a messenger? How then would you look at that in your life? Whether it's physical pain that you're experiencing, it could be chronic, long-term pain, it could be emotional pain, it could be, grieving for something or someone forever. It's not a destination, because nothing in this reality experience is permanent. And yet when we face up against those uncomfortable feelings like anger, fear, and sadness, we think, well, this is forever. This is going to stick. If I spend too long on this, I'm going to be here forever. The problem is, it's us pretending to not know we have these feelings that keeps us looped in the closed circuit experience. And it does feel like we're in them forever. But it's because we've decided to not be proactive with it. It's because we decided that, no. I don't want to look at this. I know what that felt like once, and I got my butt kicked for doing it. I don't want to go there again. And so we don't. And that is exactly what locks us back into the same carousel of thought and belief and feelings that anchor those beliefs. And we find it very difficult, year after year, the more we extrapolate from that way of being, the more evidence we collect, it's harder to dig ourselves out from that hole that we essentially created ourselves. And people don't like to
Yes,
hear
for
that.
sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. And that actually brings me again to another Qigong teacher that I worked more closely with. And he said, like, he had a certain form that really helped people who were really like desperate. They were kind of tried so many things. They had a heart condition and they tried this and that and that. And they were really in a place of, I'll just try anything. I just want to carry on my life. And he could
Mhm.
really work with them and help move through it through this form. But he said what he found with people who had such a strong diagnosis, or had been
Mhm.
told it over and over again and believed, they were the
Of course.
hardest to work through, of course, yeah, because we imprinted it so strongly and every aspect of our being.
Exactly. And not to mention that, we're hearing that evidence come from a so-called professional, right? Someone who's in the know. And so we've been taught from a very young age to put a lot of faith and a lot of credence towards people who are professionals, people who are, top in their field. And we can get so locked into that bias that we forget to look to our own inner intuitive state to say, well, do I even really think that that's true? Like, what if that's not true? What if I decided to believe that this expert was full of crapola? Sometimes even asking a question like that can untether us from such a strong energy that we feel is outside of us. Yeah.
Yeah, and many let's say healers on the planet, they've had that journey themselves, they've had severe kind of diagnosis of all kinds. And at some point they've gone, I'm not buying into any of that. I
Right.
feel I can do it. I'm just going to go away. And because they open that door, then things come to them in their life, so it's beautiful. Like you're saying, it's that openness. Okay, let's just explore a different possibility.
Right.
We don't have to believe what we're getting told, and I've had that journey as well with being diagnosed with a muscular dystrophy, and I never bought it as true for what it was. There's still
There you
some
go.
aspect of it there, but I don't get worse. I'm not in a
Mhm.
wheelchair or arm lock or anything like that, like the diagnosis says. And I did have one doctor who said I had many that had no idea it was so rare, let's say,
Mhm.
that they didn't know what it was and did all these tests, and it took quite a lot until the diagnosis came. And then I eventually met a doctor and he knew of it, and he did a test with me. He took me through all these kind of movement and watching the muscles react or respond and the nerves and all that. And afterwards, I was 36 years old, and he said, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. And I
Keep doing it.
believe I'll never have to see you again, And I was like,
Right.
cool, yeah, okay, thank
Like,
you.
yes, will
Yeah,
do. And isn't that amazing? Isn't it amazing that, today I was teaching a class and I was talking about, the mind at best is a great retriever. It retrieves what it has known before, past information. And when a situation comes up that smacks of familiarity, it will retrieve, like a good dog, not like my dog who doesn't fetch the ball when I throw it to him, but like a good dog will just retrieve that information and say, here, this is what you're looking for. But it doesn't have any creative ability outside of that, really, because it can't grasp possibility. And I use the word mind and ego interchangeably in that context, that the mind can only go off of, and the ego can only go off of information that is known to you or known in some way, shape, or form to the collective. And so anything outside of that, that is really infinite possibilities, which is about 99.97% of available reality, potential reality, it has no purview of that. It has no domain in that area. It has no context for it. It doesn't even know it exists. And yet so much available potential is left on the table because we're willing to just be like, hey, mind, what do you think? And like, I don't know, let's do this. It worked before. And there's that closed circuit experience again. It really is about that available energy of curiosity and a sense of wonder. And that just means like, well, what does that mean, Kathryn? It just means question everything. Question everything you think, you believe, you know, up until this point. Because actually, when you really think about what you think you believe you know, that's the border, the sphere of your, let's just say, the limitation of your perception. And so if you're even able to question that a little bit, you crack the egg of that perception and you start to allow new light, new information to flood in. And sometimes like gangbusters, sometimes it comes in so fast and furious. Just by questioning one thing, it might seem so innocuous, but actually something starts to shift in you really profoundly. And like, oh, well, if I'm going to question that thing and have this kind of feeling, what if I question this thing and that thing and that other thing and that other thing that guy said, and that other thing I was told by my teacher? And then you really start to unravel that whole ball of wax. And boy, is that fun.
Yeah.
Endless joy.
Yeah. I feel, many will relate to this, that, the catalyst, that gets us really on this more conscious journey is exactly that. I know for myself, I came to a point where I asked that big question. I mean, I asked questions all my life, right, from a very young age. I didn't get it. I didn't
Me
know
too.
what people were telling me. Why should I do that? And that was terrible, to be asking questions, You're this and that
You
and
got in
that thing,
trouble
but
for it. If you're like
yeah,
me, I got in trouble for it a lot.
totally. Yeah, like really, what did I get told? You don't care about anyone else but yourself. And the other thing was, you always like to argue. And one day I got the courage and I said to my dad, I said, look, Dad, if you want to talk about an argument, it takes two people to have an argument. So if you feel I'm arguing with you, you're arguing with me. But you don't see that part. Yes. And it's okay for me to have a different opinion. I don't have to
Yeah.
agree with you. You're my father. I love you. I respect you, but I may see it differently, And I can remember I was like, a teenager shaking in my shoes, but I'm like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of people, that's what happens, and for myself, when I went into a real hurt place, I just asked, so what is this life truly about? And what am I going to do about it? And instantly these whole new doors opened, and I
Mm-hmm.
very quickly just saw what you're saying. Everything I thought it was the total opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Just totally flipped over everything.
Just by asking questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
And being open to
Plugs you back
receive.
into the open loop where this, again, we return to infinite possibilities, which is, it's what we knew when we were little kids. Before we learned ourselves out of that by listening to authorities and, listening to the best expert advice of others, we already knew that. When little kids come into this realm, we know that that's intact within us. It's unspoiled within us. And we gradually get learned out of that, and then we forget. And then we wonder why we get disillusioned and why life doesn't feel playful anymore, because we're subject to all the things that we think we believe we know, which are more limiting than they are freeing.
Yeah, and we've mostly heard them from somewhere else.
Exactly. Who then they heard it from somewhere else and got it from someone else, and on it goes, right? So does anyone really know anything?
Yeah, yeah. And do you actually know yourself? It's impossible because you've totally lost touch with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that can change on a dime.
Yes, yeah.
And it really starts with starting to question, because It can be instantaneous. It can just be, what if I just breathe and I get present with myself? And what if I just let this go? And at this one time, what if I just treat this seemingly familiar situation just a tad differently than I ever have before? It's not about making colossal, what people like to call quantum leaps. That terminology is a thorn in my side because I think it's a completely misunderstood concept. But the quantum level is incremental. So people forget, like, a very, very tiny step. And in the quantum consciousness, there is no tiny, there is no large. Those are false dichotomies that we use to construct our reality here. There is inherently no big or small, no good or bad, no right or wrong. These are all mental constructs. So when we think, like, if I just move a tiny bit in the direction I prefer to go, we don't get bogged down by, oh, that's not big enough, or I should do more. None of that shit matters. Pardon my French. I'm really trying to tone it down here because I have a mouth like a sailor. But I'm trying to be polite for your audience. But if we take the tiniest little turn towards something we prefer more to experience, that's it. Because what we think is like change is incremental, and that might be true for the part of us that is playing with this linear time-space construct. But change is change as far as the quantum universe is concerned, and that changes everything. So that goes back to the premise of, when we're doing just a little smidgen of healing on ourselves, we're doing it for everyone. And who's to say that it's not colossal? Who's to say that it isn't huge? We might not need to get bogged down in qualifying it, but change is change. And if it's going more towards the preferred, something that's wholesome, something that resonates with, is the truth of you, which is just infinite possibility, experiencing more and more of itself as more of the contents of your consciousness are revealed to you by removing more of the anger, fear, and sadness that roots those beliefs, those structures, etc. You can only know expansion. And what is expansion? Unity consciousness. It's in an ever expanding state. And so are you. We get bogged down in this idea that we're stuck. We're never stuck, actually. We are making choices to stay in certain loops. And there's always a choice point at every single moment in every day. I'm still asking someone to prove me wrong. No one has yet. We have millions of choice points presented to us. But what we're choosing is reminiscent of the process and the habits of our past. Doesn't make it not a choice point. It always is. Yes. But where do we get brave enough finally start asking the questions? We're like, what if I did choose differently here? You can do it anytime.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So what would you say with people who, I see this often as well, is they see something that doesn't serve them, but because they know it, there's that safety and security within it. And it keeps them held in it, but they know they want to change it. But because of that security and that safety, because they know who they are, I have this problem, I can go and see my friends and I can talk about this thing that I don't like or don't want. And then if that's gone, well, what am I going to talk about? And there's this whole thing going on. So what would you say to people who are like in that situation?
I would say, because I'm a rather blunt teacher, that where is your happiness contingent upon someone else's approval of you? And how has that been maybe a thread in your life, that your happiness is conditional based on the standards of what someone else might be comfortable with and experiencing about you? And a lot of people get stuck in this idea of, if I change, and my best friend is Susie, and I know Susie ain't going to change ever, what are we going to talk about? How will we have our Saturday brunch and not be able to commiserate about this level of tomfoolery in our lives? What do I do? Who am I if I don't have that? And the second you start to question why you might believe that, and why your happiness, your highest quality of life, which is out there and meant for you and is more for you, whatever that translates as, why is that conditional upon someone else's approval or acceptance of this change in you? And there's a lot of things rolled up in that. We are tribal by nature. It's wired into the reptilian brain that if we're rejected by the tribe, that means death. Except we're not there anymore. We have We have more people who are autonomous and are acting in their own agency, and sometimes are so cloistered off by the rest of the world, wholly unto themselves. We don't need tribe in the way that we used to. We are begging for a different definition of what that means, and it should be one that's based on the highest good of all, not on, we need you to be this way so that the rest of us can survive. It's like, no, how can we collaborate with you being the best of you, best of who you are, so that we can match you with someone else who is also operating in the best as they are, and we come together tribally that way. That's what we're really moving towards. And so if we start acting on that now as if it's here, because everything is already here, then we start to concretize this reality. So I think it's really about questioning, like, where does this need for approval come from? Is it that deep tribal reptilian brain programming? Is it, somewhere that when I was a tiny human, I got a new bike and it was great, and my friend didn't, and then that friend never talked to me again. It's rooted somewhere, right? It didn't just show up in your energy, and chances are it's been a theme. It's something that's been on a carousel of recurring themes in your life. And when you're curious about that and can examine, oh, this is what I feel like, where are other times where I felt this way, where I felt threatened, because if I would change, that means I would lose this, this, or that. And the thing is about changing, when we start to question that, we start to move towards more of the preferred experience. What we realize is a whole treasure trove of new experiences start to avail themselves that we just could not see before. We couldn't connect with before because we were in a different, let's just call it, lower operating level of consciousness. And just by choosing differently, it's a foregone conclusion. We are going to accelerate and anchor a different consciousness state. Being able to really stabilize in it is incumbent upon our choosing that again and again, the higher, the preferred, whatever you want to call it, the best outcome. Can we keep doing that over and over? It's not a one-time thing. No one chose just once to be who they are right now. They made those choices to be that kind of person over and over and over again. So it's the same kind of process to concretize the new frequency of you. And that will always be through those choice points that present themselves hundreds, thousands of times in the day. And we start to look at the moment for the moment itself instead of what it reminds you of. We start to see possibility rather than limitation. And it's all about presence at that point. And a lot of us really aren't that present, to be fair.
Yes, yeah, that's it. It seems difficult for many to be present, and I've had that journey as well. And I find it the most, yeah, I think people, I got asked, what's the greatest spiritual practice? I'm like, well, there isn't one. However, if you're present, if you just practice being present, I think that would answer that question if you need an
Yes,
answer, because everything else
absolutely.
comes with it, so then you find, yeah, yourself and what resonates and what practice to do or not, or whatever it is. I'm curious about, because how you say, things keep showing up, and I find there's a big journey around setting boundaries and healthy boundaries, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a big part of our journey. However, I feel a lot of people miss the core reason of why they're in a situation where they feel they need to set a healthy boundary, and they don't really do
Correct.
that work, and they just leave that, and then another situation occurs again for them, so they haven't really set a boundary. So yeah, can you touch on that?
I can. For your listeners, they're probably not going to like my answer, but here goes anyway. I'm very blunt and to the point when I share this stuff. And in fact, the class that I taught today, we touched on this very topic. So it's incredibly fresh in my mind. And I think that there's that synchronicity. It's not random that you brought this up. It's not random that when I brought it up today that, rankled some feathers. So here goes. Here it comes. So a lot of times we're setting boundaries. We think we're coming at it from two different angles. The first angle is that, well, I've done so much work on myself, and I want to preserve to the best of my ability this sanctuary that I've created for myself. No one gets to mess with my stuff. Okay, so there's that. And then maybe the other part of that is we haven't established good boundaries for ourselves yet. We notice the need to do that. And there seems to be the same type of person or situation presenting in our lives over and over again, that we need to create some boundaries or, a cutoff point in our energy from that. And either way, we're looking at those boundaries. There's an undergirding of that is based in some kind of fear. And that is this: someone else or some other situation has the ability to take my power from me. That can't ever happen. You can play with the mental construct and the belief. You can create a belief structure around, I give my power away. It is not possible. It's actually impossible. So the fear is that someone's going to take my life force, my essence from me if I give too much of myself. That places the power outside of you and makes it so that you believe all that you are, all the strength, the resilience, the power, the creative ability that you are, is conditional or situational. So given that context, I like to say, here's another way to think about boundaries, that you can still cut people off from your life. If someone's got energy that you don't prefer to experience, you are not obligated to have that person in your life, period, the end, full stop. But if you're coming at that from a place of, they're going to take something from me, you're going to have to examine that, because you're going to find that the boundary placing never stops in your life. And there's always going to be what I call a habitual line stepper, someone who comes into your experience, steps over the line all the time and makes you recoil, defend yourself, and become a warrior for your own power. That's not it. That's not life. That's not a wholesome experience of life. So it's instead of, what do I prefer to experience? And what do I not prefer to experience? Everything is just experience. And there's either that which I prefer or that which I don't prefer. That can extend to situations and people. There are people I don't prefer to experience. I've been able to establish that very well in my life, but I don't call it boundaries. I don't F with them, they don't F with me. And I've just created that for myself. And not because I think their energy in my world will be conditional on whether I'm happy, pleased, joyful, abundant or not. I don't believe that at all. It's because my energy, yeah, pure and pristine, no one can mess with that. I would just prefer not to have to constantly battle with someone or, feel like we are on two different energetic wavelengths. You might as well, when you're talking to me, you might as well be talking to a catcher's mitt. And when I'm talking to you, I might as well be talking to a blade of grass, because we're not talking to people. We're arguing for things that ultimately don't matter, or presenting some kind of energy for you that's never going to mix with what your frequency is. And we're all operating different frequency wavelengths. So that's why we feel like sometimes, hey, this person really gets me, or I really get this person. Why sometimes like oil and water. So we can decide, and with love in our hearts too, to let those people go. And when I had a lot of haters early on in my YouTube days, in my videos, when I had people just come on and just say, I would laugh sometimes. First I was hurt, but sometimes it's just so mean. There's this weird barrier that goes up when there's social media or people are online or whatever, and they can say the meanest things. But if you were standing next to me in an elevator, would you be saying that to me? It's just it's a very weird thing. Anyway, I would say to those people, without even responding or defending anything that I was doing, I hear what you're saying. I really hope you find what you're looking for. And mean that with sincerity and compassion. And off they go. Never to be seen again, because I'm not getting involved in their energy in a way that it's not taking my energetic down. And I'm not doing anything where I have to put them in a place where they need to defend who they are. They're just who they are. And they don't have to have anything to do with me, and I don't have anything to do with them. So I hope that clears up the boundaries thing. I know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I feel that last part you say, that kind of just brings it back to them, where they get to sit with themselves, where you've just gone, okay.
And it ultimately comes down to, like you said, just being totally okay with yourself. And if you are totally okay with yourself, it's an energetic mismatch. Like you become invisible in a sense to people that before they were all over you, like flies on dung. Now they're not all of a sudden. So yeah, it's interesting. It's all about that kind of frequency and that energetic.
Yeah. Yeah, I love. I'm watching you hold back on your normal way of expressing. You're doing really well.
I'm trying so hard. I think I'm doing a mostly good job.
I think you're doing an amazing job, and I feel this will be really well received. For sure. I think it's really
Wonderful.
yeah, I think it's important stuff because, the whole journey become a bit too cosmic and out there or foreign or whatever. And it's really about just grounding it, just having things that actually you can really ground in your body and you can really feel
Yes,
them. And it's not necessarily has to be tangible, but it's that
it's helpful.
simplicity that you feel in the body, instead of this, oh, it's all okay, airy fairy, and I have to pull it into my body from somewhere, and
Yeah,
things
somewhere
like that.
else, somewhere out
Yeah,
there.
somewhere out there, yeah. So is there anything you'd like to share before we end the call?
Well, if I can just say one thing here to anyone and everyone who's going to be watching this, listening to this, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. A lot of people who reach for some sort of personal development or spiritual awakening, it's more often, and I've been doing this work for a long time now, a couple decades plus. It's more often than not, people are reaching for something because they feel they're broken, because they feel they're inherently unworthy, undeserving, unlovable, etc. None of that is true. In fact, you are so supported as a creator that if you do believe that, you're supported in it. So it's maybe time to switch that belief system to, what if I was totally perfect as I am, and perfect in the sense of complete as I am, complete as I am right now. And I'll never not be that. I'll never not be complete and perfect. And I'm here at an amazing time on this planet to experience this thing called life when a lot of things are changing and transitioning. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it curious? What else can we do as humans? My God, look at what we're capable of, and what could be next that's better and wholesome for everyone. And how might I be, part of that, a big part of it, maybe a bigger part than I'd like to think. And we all have this capability. I've been doing this work and going down the rabbit hole of spirituality for, I guess since I was born, and probably many lifetimes besides, but that doesn't mean I'm any more evolved than anybody else. And I think we need to lose this idea of spiritual hierarchy and pedestal placing of certain people or gurus or whatever. We're all on our own journey. We're all okay. We're all here to learn from each other and walk each other home. And we can have a little more fun with that. It doesn't have to be serious. Like, I like to swear. I like to keep things light. I like to make jokes because that's life. And it's all of it, and we don't have to be studious and stoic with this energy. There's going to be a test on it because we're here to, remember that at our core, we're abundant and beautiful and infinite and eternal beings. Will never not be that, but we're also here to have some fun. And I know the world is a heavy place at times, but just as much as things are heavy, there's some beautiful things happening. There's human beings treating each other with incredible kindness right now. There's babies being born. There's someone rescuing a sea otter right now. There's someone performing dental surgery on a robin. Like, there are incredible things happening. So let's not lose sight of, the miraculousness of this world that we chose to come down and experience, or come not down, but from wherever to experience. So I guess that's what I want to say.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's a great way to finish off. And yeah, I don't feel to add to it because I think it's just a magical way to finish. And I feel really grateful for you to come on the show and yeah, share that. I do, yeah, a little thing I love how you said that you're no more evolved than anyone else. And I think that's a really important one, that we are just where we perfectly are on our journey. And if you can embrace that, then yeah, you see more of yourself. So yeah, I think that's really beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you,
And
Jacob. This was really fun. It was a real delight to share with you today.
it was fun. Yeah, we had fun, even though you had to on a few words, but that's okay. It was fun for me.
Okay, good.
Well,
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
yeah, you're so welcome. It's a blessing to have you. And thank you all for listening. And much love to you all. And we'll see you next time.